All right. Well, welcome to everybody. Namaste to you. I hope that you are experiencing. I've heard many good things, and I'm glad for all of you who are starting to come to a situation of recognition. There's really so much going on so many levels, both I guess good and bad, positive and negative. Uh, Actually, I think all of the above, as well as several other paradoxes that are existing, enlightening and yet darkness, and so peace and completeness to you, shalom. I hope that you guys are being blessed, and I hope that you are feeling. Uh, there's really lots of things that are coming out, many of which are quite mystical, magical, amazing. Uh, so we're going to take a look for a little bit tonight at Helena's Blavatsky again. We're going to pick up, and I know for y'all that it's quite difficult at this point. I'm kind of trying to listen to intuition and figure out where it is on Wednesday nights that I really want to go next. Uh, I think if a group of people were together where they could every night read Helena's work, they would probably get a lot more out of it. It's just so intense. She was an amazing. She was one of the. If you could give her that, she probably wouldn't accept it. But if you could give it to her, she would be probably one of the top mystics that's ever existed next to Yeshua. Uh, Certainly in that same line of mystics. She manifested things out of thin air, and I think that there's pieces. So I'll just share from what I'm kind of sensing. There's really a lot going on this month for some people. I've talked to some, and this month for some people is going to be actually it was kind of touted as the month of judgment, but not necessarily judgment in the concept. The universe, the monad, if you would, uh, and even that brings up a thought in another rabbit trail I'd like to go down at some point with you guys, because I know that there are still people that are Christians that are still praying to a not known God. Actually, in many cases, you're praying to the demiurge. Even when in all the time we spent in Christianity, we were praying to the demiurge because the demiurge is Yahweh. So when you find out that maybe you don't have that revelation yet, but I kind of try to seize them because some of these things are so overwhelming that what by the Gnostics was called the blind, ignorant creator who said he is God and he is a jealous God. The Jews build up as being Yahweh, the creator God. Uh, and so those things, if you have spent all of your life in Christianity, I mean, those are like major really things. In church we heard him called God mostly, but man, the God of the Bible was everything, and then you get outside of that lie, and you all of a sudden see that he was actually one of the lowest of the Canaanite pantheon. Uh, and that in and of itself, because whether they admit it or not, the Jews are still worshiping Canaanite gods. It's amazing. Uh, Friends, the deception that has been propagated on humanity is on an unprecedented level. But I will tell you something that surpasses it, and that is the changes that are happening and revolving in the universe, the things that are coming uh, for us, in front of us, the things that are already happening. So, if you, and the theme of this month being a month of judgment, the judgment that you're going to be judged on is by the things that have been released to you by spoken word, by logos, which is what I try to do here twice a week, is to speak the word. That's logos. Uh, and when you hear those things, of course, there is a personal perception. That is to say, Maybe you do, maybe you don't, maybe you swish it around, maybe you don't resonate with it. I've certainly had people say, man, it took me 3 or 4 days before I finally got a hold of what you were actually saying. And all of those things are certainly part of it and understandable. I would that most people would spend 3 or 4 days actually thinking, but that's might be a far stretch for a lot of people. And so this concept of judgment then is really more about judging what are you doing, the monad. And just so that you know, you'll hear me probably more and more use the term God and monad. God, Father, and monad are really all the same thing. When Yeshua would say the Father, the Father, the Father, he was actually speaking of the monad. And so many people prefer to know the name of the of who the divine one next to the one that is divine but is unknowable and unexplainable, which is the ultimate light that we all are. And so in those concepts, you also, whether you understand this or not, and whether this just goes in and out, is kind of irrelevant. But the reality of it all, and I've kind of shared a few pieces, and it does bring kind of a blank stare often. But I think what we really haven't, maybe for some anyways, haven't started putting together the reality that if all consciousness is consciousness, consciousness is what created everything that exists. The unknowable one became conscious of his self, if you would, in that term. That's using a masculine title, but that's just simply because our minds are too feeble to use something greater. And so the collective consciousness is the reality of everything that exists, is all part of the collective consciousness. And the reality for you and I is, so stop and think about this for a second. You have your human body part, and I've more and more, I'm trying to get people to grab the revelation, because I've talked to people and they're still hung. They don't even think that they're hung. And I've had some of them tell me about all of these things, and then you listen to what they say, and they're just convincing themselves that somehow they've changed. But there is within us two separate halves of two separate wholes. And so how does that work? This isn't quite like the feminine and masculine thing. It is a duality, and we are a duality. But we are human, but we're not human at all. We're only residing in a human. And so stop and think about it and let that sink in. You are simply residing. It's like your address on your house is where you live, but that's not you. And that's exactly the same situation that we are in. So put this one in your pipe and smoke it if you would, okay? You are human, and everyone that you know is human, as long as you function in a human mind. As you begin to move out of a human mind and begin to recognize the reality of remembering who you really are, which so far I haven't really met any people that are functioning in the realm that they truly get it. It's head knowledge. It's not experiential. Because when it becomes experiential, then that's when you begin to see the things manifesting that are happening. And they're really not happening, to the most part, they're really not happening very much at all in the earth as a whole. That is to say, you're not hearing daily reports of someone walking by someone, and because of their aura, a person that doesn't have a leg all of a sudden jumps out of a wheelchair, and by the time they stand up, they have two legs. Those things I firmly believe are coming, but we're a long ways from people touching that inside of themselves, although it already does exist. And so if you'll stop and think about this, and even Peter talks about that we have to put off this garment, talking about the physical body, but we function in our ego and the other two minds, hopefully some anyways, at least the third one, the higher self mind. But stop for a second, if you would, and think about the reality that if we are not human, we're only residing inside of a human constraint, which is what it is. It constrains us, it holds us, that's why when people leave their bodies in either NDE or intentionally, which is something I also desire to have, to be able to leave my physical body at will, which has happened in the past and is certainly available to us. When we begin to recognize that everything is consciousness, and we have this concept of human self, and that somehow whatever your picture might be of what that consciousness constitutes. And be very careful here, because getting this wrong sends you not to hell, but it sends you down wrong paths that you will be looking for something that may or may not even actually exist. So stop, if you would, and ponder this for a second. If our humanity is not us, and humanity exists and we function in it, what does that really mean to society? Now be careful here. If you're not taking methylene blue, you might want to, because you're going to need lots of mental concept, mental power. And just so you know, I'm not the only one that is telling people that this truly, as the Kabbalion, which I shared with you guys, this truly is mine. For people who love and enjoy walking around in mindlessness, this is not ever going to resonate with them, because they're not desirous. And I'm hearing lots of speakers, even on YouTube, that are saying and sharing and voicing the same words that Source has given me directly, and I suspect gave them directly, that as we begin to grow, one of the side effects of higher consciousness is also higher intelligence. And so for those of you who maybe can't quite understand, I don't know what that means, but I do know that being tied to higher consciousness has everything to do with higher intelligences. There are now scientists that are saying that there are changes, if consciousness is changing, that there should also be changes in the outworking that works with why people's timelines shift, because one person's intelligence is being increased by higher consciousness, and they no longer fit in with lower intelligence people anymore. And it gets uncomfortable, and it's just not enjoyable, and it's like, and you don't want to be the bad person that goes, well, that person's just stupid and I'm tired of hearing them. But in reality, that may very well be exactly how you feel. And that's okay. I've been blessed to get an opportunity with several Vedics, and all of the spirit world is telling everyone that we're supposed to be so quiet and peaceful and loving and kindness. And I don't buy that bunk for a second, to be honest with you. And I've been very honest with everybody about that. What's really funny is that the most ancient teachings that existed, including the teachings of Yeshua, So I used to ask myself a question as a Christian. How could this guy who was God, how could he come to earth and go inside of a temple and beat and scream and do all of these things, and yet he's universal peace? How does that work? And I now know. It's been one of the most beautiful answers. If you are one of those who is judging your world based on what you perceive to be lack of conflict, you have missed the purpose. Okay? The problem is that emotions are real. Emotions were given to us. Emotions used properly are very positive, even if they cause conflict. Has anybody heard that? See, you've been told by all of these people that are talking about how you're vibing, and I know that I do because I vibe at a very high frequency and most people can't deal with me. And I wondered, what the hell is wrong? Well, come to find out as it works, for thousands of years, there's been nothing wrong with me. In fact, I'm functioning exactly as intended. So when people say, well, I want to run away, well, that's just them running away. That never has been the Vedic way. You go, so I guess what I'm trying, because it's so huge. As we move into higher consciousness, the question is, do you lie to people constantly by just biting your tongue and doing nothing? Or do you function in the darkness as a being of light? If you walk down the street, are you more light if you see some guys mugging a woman and you say, oh, but wait a second, peace and high vibe says I should stay peaceful, and if I engaged in that, then I would not be peaceful, and of course I can't do that. And that may be a little excessive, but I would like you to know that if that is your mindset, that's exactly what you're doing. You're walking by thousands of issues that you were put there to deal with. So here's what I'm noticing. Half the people still want a free ride to heaven, and they think if they just shut up and don't do anything and run away from everything that causes conflict, then they'll somehow, they're spiritual. Well, what if Source put you here to be the one that conquers that situation? See, people don't want to think. They don't want to ask, what is it that Monad wants from humanity? And good and right and just is always the theme of the day. Good and right and just. There's not one word in there about peace. Yeshua says to us, I am eternal peace. And he goes into a temple and he beats people for doing wrong. He goes onto the river and he is accosted by Pharisees and he thrashes them, speaks ill of them, makes fun of them, and yet everyone says, well, that's okay because Jesus did it. And you miss the whole point, dear saint. It has nothing to do with that. The peace that comes has nothing to do with your human emotions. That's the problem. We still can't separate ourselves from being human because we have no consciousness of higher consciousness. And there's lots of people like Bashar, if you listen, he's saying many of the same things that I'm saying. Okay? Constantly, he says those things. And people listen to him and go, do, I'm being peaceful. Let me go listen to this person who tells me I'm wonderful and everything is love. And everything is love, but I ask a spiritual question. What is love? What is love, the love of God? What is that? What does it look like? How does it manifest? What does it make you have to do? How do you have to behave? And nobody even cared to ask those questions. They just say love. And that's supposed to fix everything. But they have no consciousness of what love is. So how can you love God if you don't even know what love is? You can't. It's a joke. You're being bamboozled by the same power forces that told you all of these other lies that you've been living under your whole life. So what is it? Then it is about the reality of us becoming what we are already. There's no question that that is true. But so everything I've said is a piece of this about your functioning, but this is really the stumper that I want to ask tonight. If it is true that you are made up of a matrix of a human body, which is your avatar, that's the picture, that's the thing they put on the top of your Snapchat picture that's not you, but it's you. Okay, that's all your human body is to the spirit realm. It's just an avatar. It's just something that says this individual one that has these traits. You're an avatar. But maybe you haven't, and maybe some of you have. But stop and think about this and ask yourself a question. If we are physical beings, so are we physical beings that are having a spiritual experience, or are we spirit beings having a physical experience? And those two things are diabolically opposed. And of course, the actual answer is that we are all spirit, irrelevant to the human body. You will see a lot of people before it's over with check out. This is going to become a very strong phenomenon. Maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years. You might start seeing it at the end of this year, where people just are found sitting in lotus up against the end of their bed in their bedroom, and their body is physically dead, and they just chose to opt out. Most of you don't even know that we have that. We have the choice to pick when we die. And so that for many is that's breaking some more of the of the holy cows, if you would. But the question that I really wanted to get to you, because I think it really is it's very huge in the concept of things, and it's all stemmed out of the reality that Yeshua told us that we were to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And I've often wondered that, because first off, I haven't ever met anybody who does that. I've met lots of people who can be kind, but loving someone the way they love themselves is a totally different story. But how does it work if you are a two-part being and part of you is your physical mind, your ego, yourself, the physical? If that is a reality, and if that's one half of you, and the other half of you is this overwhelmingly amazing thing called higher consciousness that access realms of power and has the ability simply to speak to things and create them out of nothing instantly, which is also part of what's coming. I'm telling you, it is coming. And when it begins to manifest amongst specific people, it's gonna be everywhere, because nobody has ever seen the reality of who Yeshua was live functioning, but it is coming. There are going to be many Yeshuas walking this earth before this is over with. But stop and think about this for a second. If there is, and you can answer the questions for yourself, if there is a collective consciousness, what does that mean? Because if you listen to any teachings at all, you're going to hear people that some talk constantly about the collective conscious, collective conscious, collective conscious. Well, what is it? What is that? How does that work? How does it lay out? How does it have to do with us individually? And the reality of that statement is that there is only one consciousness, and everything is consciousness. So that is the collective. Okay, then stop for a second and ask yourself, if you are constantly collective consciousness, and every other human that you know is also always has been collective consciousness, then what does that mean? Because if you can't see, if your mind isn't already bopping with the reality of what I'm saying, then you're not really paying very good attention. Because to be quite honest with you, dear friends, the only thing that isn't connected to source is our physical body. And so what Yeshua was trying to get us to get a hold of is that you function, and I have always functioned in the realm of the human and never in the realm of consciousness. Why is this important? Because we are moving into a place of not bullshit spiritualism. I'm talking about collective consciousness. People that are light people. They're here now. I'm one of them. It's not if, that's a fact. And so what is happening to us is that we are supposed to be recognizing when we look at another human that that human is me. Stop and think about that for a second. If everything is collective consciousness and we are all collective consciousness, then that means that you are me and I am you. The only place that deviates has to do totally only with the physical body. That's why they, in the past, in Atlantis, there were no spoken words. Do you know why there was no spoken words? Because they all knew there was no separation. There is much teaching going on today, and I've heard as much of it corrupt as I have heard that is good. But we are all exactly the same thing. And you function in your ego realm as long as you continue to see a difference between you and someone else. You'll never get out of the trap. You will come back in again. Stop and think about that. Do you think that that would motivate you if you truly believe in Yeshua in the first place as the chrism, as the anointed one that came from before anything that ever was? When you were created, he was also there as well. What does it mean really now when you see what he was saying as a mystic, which is what all of this babbling has been about, is to try to get you to get a hold of what Yeshua was really saying to humans is when you do other people harm, you do yourself harm. That's why he made the statement in the Gnostic text when he said that sin is what you do to yourself. Did you know that when you do things to other people, you're actually doing them to yourself? All of those harsh words that you have to people with no concept or no words when there should be words is just as bad as saying the words. I watch people all the time and they say, well, I'm just going to choose not to say anything because if I say something, it might cause a conflict. So what is truth? So are you saying now that if there's any conflict, then it's not truth? Because there are a lot of people that are saying that. I'm gonna run and I'm gonna be by myself and I'm gonna do things. Those times, if you're doing that to run, dear friend, I promise you, whatever you're running from is never gonna let up. It's gonna chase you till the day you leave that human body. And that's part of shadow work. All of these things are all about mind. They're all about consciousness. And nobody seems, for the most part, to want to talk very much about consciousness because it's too deep and it requires everything of you. You have to actually think. And most people want free, not think. So, if you would, I hope that I would instill in you that you begin to recognize that. What does it really mean? And is this concept really true? Because it could take someone multiple days, multiple months to grab a hold of that reality. Because most people are so programmed, as the Bible says, to be carnally minded is death. Did you know that that is a mystical statement? If you are carnally minded, if you look at humans and all you can see is the physical, you are carnally minded. If you look at yourself and all you can see is you, the person, you are carnally minded. They weren't talking about someone who looked at a woman and thought about having sex with her, which is how Christianity used that. Because there is no morality in the monad. Morality does not exist. There's only right and wrong. And so as we go along, I know what I'm saying is 10 million times bigger than what most people maybe can grasp, but it does need to be addressed, and it does need to be said to people. Hopefully the ones that will think will begin to think on it, and the profoundness that comes out of it will absolutely boggle your mind. But ask yourself, what does it really mean when you look at another human? What do you see? If you know that their consciousness and that we're all light, then how can you any longer look at humans and judge them because of their bad behavior when you yourself are just like them? In fact, you are them. So I've had enough of that. I knew it was going to be really difficult to get through and to get across, and I'm sure that it will be revisited many times before it's over. But it will totally revolutionize your mind when you begin to recognize that person that you're looking at is you, and you are them. So I'll leave that to you. For those of you that will, you will, and those that don't, well, okay, that's all cool. So Helena, when we left off a few weeks ago, she's trying to give us, friends, the deception is so deep. If you think that in 5 words, somebody is going to clarify for you the quantities and the layers of deception that have gone on this earth, the archons have orchestrated everything. They've orchestrated these things. They've been studying humanity for tens of thousands of years. I think that it's wonderful that we're all of a sudden finding out that there is much life that existed 200, 300, and 400,000 years. It's almost like weekly we encounter a new piece that says humanity is older. Just so you know, about 13,000 years ago, there was a place that was called Eridu. And there was a guy that lived in Eridu, and it says of him that he was the most mindful person that existed on the earth. He has a name that starts with an A, but it's not Adam. But that's where they got the story from for the Adam in the Bible, was from an ancient citizen leader, high consciousness person of Eridu. And he was very honorable. He was very intelligent. He was very conscious. And so the end of these deceptions that have been given to us are quite real, but they're quite huge. And so she tells us about the soulless beings, and I left off here as best I can remember last time on purpose. So listen to what she says. She's talking about the soulless. She says, these situations, the occasions, the spirits are able to subdue and control these soulless beings, which are ever ready to assume pompous names if left to themselves. Okay? Dig that. Soulless beings who are capable of making pompous names. That's ego. Totally ego. And just so you know, the hugeness of this whole concept, there are a larger quantity of people on this earth that do not have the spark. They are the soulless ones. They exist, they have eyes, they sleep, they go to work, they live just like everybody else. And that is becoming more and more, and it always has been. So that's something that you have to deal with. So they are ever ready to assume pompous names if left to themselves in such a way that the mischievous spirit of the air, shaped in the real image of the human spirit, will be moved by the latter like a marionette and unable to either act or utter other words. than those imposed on him by the immortal soul. But this requires many conditions generally unknown to the circles of even spiritualists, most in the habit of regularly attending seances. Not everyone can attract human spirits who likes or who likes. One of the most powerful attractions of our departed ones is their strong affection for those whom they have left on earth. It draws them irresistibly by degrees into the current of the astral light vibrating between the person sympathetic to them and the universal soul. Another very important condition is harmony and the magnetic purity of the persons present. If this philosophy is wrong, if all of the materialized forms emerging in darkened rooms from still darker cabinets are spirits of men who once lived upon this earth, why such a difference between them and the ghosts that appear unexpectedly? Unrestful souls, hovering about the spots where they were murdered or coming back for some other mysterious reasons of their own, with warm hands, feeling like living flesh, but they are known to be dead and buried, not distinguishable from living mortals. We have well-attested facts of such apparitions making themselves suddenly visible, but never until the beginning of the era of materializations did we see anything like them. In the medium and daybreak of September 8, 1876, we read a letter from a lady traveling on the continent narrating a circumstance that happened in a haunted house. She says, a strange sound proceeded from a darkened corner of the library, and on looking up, she perceived a cloud or a column of luminous vapor. The earthbound spirit was hovering about the spot rendered accursed by his evil deed. As the spirit was doubtless a genuine elementary apparition which made itself visible of its own free will, in short, an umbra, it was, as very respectable shadows should be, visible but impalpable, and if the impalpable at all, communicating to the feeling of touch the sensation of a mass of water suddenly clasped in the hands, or of condensed but cold steam. It was luminous and vapory. For aught we can tell, it might have been the real personal umbra of the spirit, persecuted and earthbound, either by its own remorse and crimes or those of another person or spirit. The mysteries of after death are many, and modern materializations only make them cheap and ridiculous in the eyes of the indifferent. To these assertions may be opposed as well a fact well known amongst spiritualists. The writer has publicly certified to have seen such materialized forms. We have most assuredly done so and are ready to repeat the testimony. We have recognized such figures as the visible representations of acquaintances, friends, and even relatives. We have, in company with many other spectators, heard them pronounce words in languages unfamiliar not only to the medium and to everyone in the room, except ourselves, but in some cases to almost, if not quite every medium in America and Europe, for they were the tongues of Eastern tribes and peoples. At the time, these instances were justly regarded as conclusive proofs of the genuine mediumship of the uneducated Vermont farmer who sat in the cabinet, but nevertheless these figures were not the forms of the persons they appeared to be. They were simply their portrait statues, constructed, animated, and operated by the elementaries. If we have not previously elucidated this point, it was because the spiritualistic public was not then ready to even listen to the fundamental proposition that there are elemental and elementary spirits. Since that time, this subject has been broached and more or less widely discussed. There is less hazard now in attempting to launch upon the restless sea of criticism the hoary philosophy of the ancient sages, for there has been some preparation of the public mind to consider it with impartiality and deliberation. 2 years of agitation have effected a marked change for the better. Pausanias writes that 400 years after the Battle of Marathon, there were still heard in the place where it was fought the neighing of horses and the shouts of shadowy soldiers. We also find that manifest here. There have been many people who spiritually have been drawn to Civil War battle sites, and they've seen people who died in the Civil War that never released. So I think what is so huge about this is she experienced it and knew how to make it work, where other people have experienced it but no knowledge of what really is going on. Madame Blavatsky, man, the college scientific system tried every way they could to defame her, and yet she constantly was coming through and manifesting just as Yeshua did and would. So I guess part of that goes with today, the concept, the picture of what is coming for humanity for those people who will engage with their higher self. I hope you will, because absolutely mind-boggling what we're going to get to see. And so, the neighing of horses, equine spirits. How many of you can deal with that? And if it be pronounced untrue that horses have spirits, which assuredly no one among zoologists, physiologists, or psychologists, or even spiritualists can either prove or disprove, then must we take it for granted that it was the immortal souls of men who produced a neighing at Marathon to make the historical battle scene more vivid and dramatic? The phantoms of dogs and cats and various other animals have been repeatedly seen, and the worldwide testimony is as trustworthy upon this point as that with respect to human apparitions. Who or what personates? If we are allowed such an expression, the ghost of departed animals, is it, again, human spirits? As the matter now stands, there is no side issue. We have either to admit that animals have surviving spirits and souls as well as ourselves, or hold with that porphyry that there are in the invisible world of kind of tricky and malicious demons, intermediary beings between living men and gods, spirits that delight in appearing under every imaginable shape, beginning with the human form and ending with those of multifarious animals. Before venturing to decide the question whether the spectral animal forms so frequently seen and attested are the returning spirits of dead beasts, we must carefully consider their reported behavior. Do these specters act according to the habits and display the same instincts as the animals during life? Do the spectral beasts of prey lie in wait for victims and timid animals flee before the presence of man? Or do the latter show a malevolence and disposition to annoy quite foreign to their natures? Many victims of these obsessions, notably the afflicted persons of Salem and other historical witchcrafts, testified to having seen dogs and cats and pigs and other animals entering their rooms, biting them, trampling upon their sleeping bodies, and talking to them, often inciting them to suicide and other crimes. In the well-attested case of Elizabeth Esslinger, mentioned by Dr. Kerner, the apparition of the ancient priest of Wimmenthal was accompanied by a large black dog, which he called his father, and which dog, in the presence of numerous witnesses, jumped on all the beds of the prisoners. At another time, the priest appeared with a lamb, and sometimes with 2 lambs. Most of those accused at Salem were charged by the seers with consulting and plotting mischief with yellow birds, which would sit on their shoulder or on the beams overhead. And unless we discredit the testimony of thousands of witnesses in all parts of the world and in all ages and allow a monopoly of seership to modern mediums, a specter, animals do appear and manifest all the worst traits of depraved human nature without themselves being human. What then can they be but elementals? Descartes was one of the few who believed and dared to say that to occult medicine we shall owe discoveries destined to extend the domain of philosophy. And Briere de Boismont not only shared in these hopes, but openly avowed his sympathy with supernaturalism, which he considered the universal grand creed. We think with Guizot, he says that the existence of society is bound up in it. It is in vain that modern reason, which notwithstanding is positivism, cannot explain the intimate cause of any phenomena, rejects the supernatural. It is universal and at the root of all hearts. The most elevated minds are frequently its most ardent disciples. Christopher Columbus discovered America, and America's Vespucius repeated the glory and usurped his dues. Theophrastus Paracelsus rediscovered the occult properties of the magnet, the bone of Horus, which, 12 centuries before his time, had played such an important role in the theurgic mysteries, and he very naturally became the founder of the school of magnetism and of medieval magico-theurgy. But Mesmer, who lived nearly 300 years after him, and as a disciple of his school, brought the magnetic wonders before the public, reaped the glory that was due to the fire philosopher, while the great master died in a hospital. So goes the world. New discoveries evolving from old science, new men, but the same old nature. And I don't know if you guys have understood this. There are many people that as they hear these ancient things, we were bamboozled massively that everything is a demon. It was really funny to me in my studies of Edgar Cayce, who was in trance at least 24,000 times. He read for every dignitary that had any clout. Presidents, kings, rulers from other countries came to his little country farm home with his little country family, and he would go into trance and read. And he said he made this statement, and it's quite blind. It's quite huge, actually. But Edgar Cayce said that in all of his times of traveling the astral planes, he never once saw a demon. And so what they're trying to get through, at least in partial to you, is whatever thing that a man fears, that is what a person will manifest. Now, I know this might be difficult for you, and I don't say that there aren't more spirits than we have any concept of, because there are. But I would like for you to understand something. Now that we have the blessing and the beauty of finding out that we create our own reality, where does that stop? Where does that stop? If your frequency is fear, you're going to see fearful things. I don't say that I haven't had the hair stand up. I've had shifts, and I knew there was a spirit being, and the hair stand up. I knew that it was there, but it wasn't there physically. And so, while I may not have all of the answers, I do know that we're headed in a direction that will certainly validate the things that I'm saying, as well as will help us gain understanding about these things. The spirit realm is real, and the mass majority of those things that are functioning in the spirit realm that have to do with humans, most of those are archon I don't even know the proper word. I don't know if you should call them spirits. That's what I view them as. They are spirit forces. Spirit forces of control and manipulation, and they study humans and they find out what it is. If they can make you run simply by putting a thought in your head and you run and you never accomplish anything for the universe, they've been. So ask yourself this, because she talks about positivism. It's always been a curse. People who think that doing nothing is a positive thing are totally deluded in their minds. That isn't meant to be offensive. There are times for us to say things and time for us to not. And we see that Yeshua taught us all of these things. But I promise you, as far as running, there was no run from Yeshua. He stood and went toe to toe with the most powerful people of his day, and he never blinked an eye. So there has to be something more than what is being taught and what is being programmed into people. Part of that comes out of Christianity. If you put your hands behind your back and you just show outwardly that you're peaceful, and we call it, what do we call that? Pious behavior, which does zero for dealing with the problems that spirits encounter on a daily basis. It says that everything's okay. And we came here, the light workers that are here, Dolores Cannon talked about that there have been 3 waves of light workers come to this earth. They're here to help humans. And so if you're not a light worker, then maybe you're under a whole different set of rules than what light workers are. But if you are a light worker that is higher consciousness that came from the monad, you came here for the purpose of helping humans in this amazing time. And you're useless to help a human if you do nothing. You're not any use to the monad at all. And there's going to be many people that are already falling prey to this sickness, and it's going to very much affect them. They will have internal, but it's selfish. See, if everyone else is you, then whatever you would do to yourself, does that mean that that's what you're supposed to do to them? Because you might want to rethink that one. Because if that's the case, then what about the people who cut themselves with knives? So then in reality, if they treat everyone the way they treat themselves, then they should, everywhere they go, they should cut people. If they lie to themselves constantly, then that person, everywhere they go, they should lie to people. I think you see the fallacy in that belief system. But nobody's telling anybody about these different concepts that seem to keep coming up. If they are you and you are them, and if you grab that revelation, then all of a sudden that should give you all of the hidden wisdom that you need about how you treat other humans. That's what Yeshua was talking about, friends. Yeshua knew what we haven't known. What is coming out is that this body means nothing, and if you're only working in a realm that has to do with humanity, then you are only dealing with part. You are not dealing with the spirit realm, even though many carnal people call themselves spiritualists. So I hope that you will at least give a thought to these things. They're really not ifs, but if you want to make it an if, then that's fine too. But the reality of it is, if you do, you'll begin to change your mind. I don't want to be lied to. I don't care how hard the truth is. I want the truth. And I know that there are other humans that feel the same, but there are many humans that want to be lied to. They want somebody to tell them that their behavior, if it's bad, is okay. And it's not okay. But if you can't see that, then there may be some other problems that somebody needs to look at. So Namaste to each and every one of you. I hope you'll take this stuff, and I hope you'll learn how. As the Vedics say, fight, fight, fight. One of the ways, when I heard this, and just then I just saw a vision, when Donald Trump was shot in the ear and he fell down without him knowing anything, when he stood up, he was light. What did he do? He wasn't unpeaceful. He wasn't, see, God, if I could get through to the humans, it would so blow me away. The peace that you are supposed to be experiencing has nothing to do with your humanity. The peace you're supposed to be experiencing is when you're in bad situations in your humanity, that you, the true person, remains peaceful. So when you spank your children, are you a bad person? And I have heard spirituals say that that's bad. Oh, you're hurting your kids, okay? And the reality is the only way you hurt your children is if you don't correct them. That's why we have so many kids that have bad behavior, because CPS will take your kids away from you if you properly correct your children, okay? So, but are you presenting love to them by letting them do whatever and not making them come to consciousness that that is bad and wrong behavior, whatever it was that they did? So just hold that when someone, and there's a 7-layer plan that has to do with how you react in situations, which would probably benefit some people. So then the principle is Yeshua in a nutshell, friends. You might ask yourself, if you come into that, you probably will tomorrow, but you might ask yourself the old cliche term, what would Yeshua do? What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And was Jesus so totally out of it spiritually, this perfect ascended master? I think not. So what he actually do is telling the world that they're going to tell you all of this BS over here. None of it's true. He would have been wrong if he didn't do those things. Sorrowful for all of the positivity corruption that I just destroyed there. But friend, to a large extent, a lie is still a lie, even if you do it in positivity. So hold on to that. Somebody is going to get revelation out of this, and it's going to totally change many concepts. I know, because I'm experiencing it. So peace to each and every one of you. Shalom. I hope you have an amazing week. I hope that you begin to feel some of these things really begin to explode, and one thing rolls to another and rolls to another and rolls to another. And then you throw in a few of those synchronicities that are going to start happening, because as one thing rolls to another, inevitably the flow is coming, and we are to be in the flow, coherent. So blessings and peace to each and every one of you in your higher self. Namaste.